welcome to the Ridgecrest podcast, where for the past 100 weeks we have sat down to talk about the previous sermon and pretend as though people are listening. This is episode number 100. We got some poppers.
Woo! Oh! All right.
I'm not cleaning that up.
Oh, that was a dud.
Oh, you have that? I got a good one.
There we go. So if you are listening to our podcast, this is a great opportunity to explain. We do have a YouTube channel as well where some of our listeners watch the podcast each week, and this might be a great week to go view because we have all of our little party favors, some of which may be blending into the background. We're needing to move confetti so it obstructs the camera view. We have, in the opening minutes of our 100 podcast, officially ruined everything that we have built.
They didn't even make noise.
No, and I was a little disappointed with the noisemakers and
know.
we got the little clapper hands. I mean, it might pick up well on the
I have no
microphone,
idea.
but we got our glasses on. We're having a good time, and here we are again. Celebrating our podcast 100 episodes, basically 2 years.
We're 100 episodes old,
Yes.
and my hair has grayed substantially since we started this thing.
Because of the podcast, or
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to
Yeah.
that. I mean, it just
So this week, I thought it would be fun to kind of celebrate this 100 episode milestone with doing things a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Not necessarily taking a deep dive into the previous Sunday sermon, but just kind of talk, have a good time. We're serious a lot. I know that for me to be the case for sure. So I thought this would be a great opportunity for us just to kind of talk through some stuff and
Absolutely,
just have a good time and let our listeners see maybe a different side. And
They may not like what they see.
The ones who absolutely love the podcast, next week we'll get back on track. For those of you who are new to the podcast, this is a great week to join. But again, we'll
this is
be
not
back.
what we normally do.
No, so but maybe we'll have tons more views and listeners, and we realize that from now on we need to start a comedy show as far as a new Ridgecrest podcast.
What happens a lot of time before we actually start talking about anything related to the sermon, we have conversations that range from all kinds of really nerdy stuff that we're interested in to absolutely ridiculous things that we think are funny. So maybe we should just start including that as a part of the podcast. And it's like the prequel to the podcast.
That's right. We can do like a pre-show. And that's kind of what like today's will be like.
Precast.
Yeah, the precast. Well, write that down, Stephen.
It's $1 million idea.
That's right. So I figured that's kind of what today's will be more like, is that kind of pre-podcast that like you mentioned, and us just kind of getting.
I mean, we can put the hats and the glasses on for the precast.
That's right. That's right. It's usually a big party.
Yeah.
So
that's all we do here.
So here we are, 100.
Yeah.
I'll let you get us going and get us started on this very odd podcast that we have.
Okay, so I can see you. I'm going to go ahead and take off my green glasses, and maybe people can see
I'll take
my
mine off as well, because
face.
every time I try to take a drink of coffee, it won't reach my mouth, and so I have to like lean my head back.
Yeah, that's not good. All right, so what I thought I would do is come up with some questions that have to do with 100, things that we may be interested in 100 times or that sort of thing. So somebody was talking earlier today. I was listening to them talk about meals, like what's their favorite meal of the day.
Okay.
So if you had to eat 100 meals and they had to be the same 100 times in a row, which meal of the day would be your go-to? I know my answer. So would it be breakfast, lunch, dinner, a snack?
Okay, so we're talking about
just which meal of the day. We'll get to the like certain types of food in just a minute.
Okay.
And listeners, feel free. I want you to answer this in your own mind. Like if you had to eat the same meal over and over and over again. Again, I'm not talking about like a particular type of food. I'm talking about which part of the day, breakfast, lunch, or dinner.
And you eat it at that time, I'm assuming. So like if we're talking about, or are you saying you eat that
100 times in a row?
Okay. So like if you choose breakfast, you would eat breakfast for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yep.
Okay. I think I had to go with lunch.
Really? How come?
I think so. Well, because lunch creates some variety.
Yeah.
More times than not, lunch is the day that I go out to eat.
Okay.
And so I enjoyed that element of it. And I've never been much of a breakfast person anyway. Every now and then
That's sad.
But yeah, I think I'd go lunch because I feel like that would create the most flexibility.
I'm absolutely gonna have breakfast 100 times in a row.
100 times in a row. So
I mean, yes.
So over the next 30 days, you would just eat breakfast for
3 meals
every
a day.
meal.
Absolutely. I'd have, because you can do pancakes, you can do waffles, you got bacon, you got eggs, you got hash browns, you got so much as far as combinations that you can do. I know lunch is that way as well.
Yeah.
But you also include coffee as a part of pretty much every breakfast meal.
Yeah, but I have a coffee in my hand at all times of the day. So
maybe you have a problem.
Would I be able to have, well, you're not lying.
So, Steven, which one are you doing? Breakfast, lunch, dinner, 100 times in a row.
There's not really any rhyme or reason to any of those in my life except for breakfast is, breakfast.
Yeah.
So, probably lunch or dinner.
All right, so Steven's going lunch or dinner. All right. Now, if you had to eat a particular type of food 100 times in a row, what's one that you could just endure and enjoy maybe for at least the first part of it, but then after a while, I know anytime you have to eat the same thing 100 times in a row, it's going to get old.
Yeah. I'm terrible at that. Whitney, she could eat the same meal every single day, no problem. And me, it drives me nuts. Yeah. So I've got to take a little bit more time to think through that.
I'm going to go ahead and just say pizza probably would be the meal of the food of choice. I mean, just because you at least get some variety in pizza, you could potentially get different toppings and that sort of thing. Cold pizza was, you can eat that for breakfast. So you have some options when it comes to pizza. That would probably be my choice.
Yeah, it's tough because I'm a pasta guy. That's probably my favorite food.
Ooh, pasta for breakfast can be rough.
I know, and then even when I think about pasta, it's such a heavy food.
Yeah.
I would get tired of it, even though I love pasta if I were eating it every single day. So that's tough.
Steven, do you have one? While Matt's thinking.
I would take the opposite approach.
Yeah.
Because if I ate the same food 100 times in a row, I'd probably never want to eat it again. So I don't want to eat pizza 100 times in a row because I want.
You want to eat pizza later. That makes sense.
So I'd probably pick a food that I should eat more of, but don't like. So I have no choice but to develop good habits.
Steven has taken a practical approach here. That's
a lot of wisdom there.
Way more than mine. That's okay though.
Yeah.
You think of one? And now, when I was a teenager, it would have been honey buns. Man. Whew. I could eat some honey buns. Terrible choice, but so good.
I could probably go like some kind of like high protein something like a steak, grilled chicken.
Man, grilled chicken 100 times in a row.
Like you'd have to I'd have to have some flexibility as far as the seasoning and how I cooked it.
Could I use sauce?
That's right, and that would be the question. If it was just like plain chicken, no, there's no way.
Yeah.
But if I had some flexibility in sauce, I could make almost 100 different kinds of grilled chicken, I think, or baked chicken or whatever.
Could you eat manna for 40 years?
I mean, maybe.
Every day?
I guess it depends on how good it was.
Yeah, my guess is it's good. It's bread from heaven, so it's got to be pretty good.
That's kind of my thought. I mean, but you also have to wonder, still, like, do you get tired of it? And that's a whole other thing. Like, when we think about, like, God providing something that's really good, and then we're like, enjoy it, but then what we perceive as that goodness wearing off, and then we get bored with it or whatever. And, see, we can still be serious on the
Absolutely.
100 podcast.
Yeah. Okay. Shifting.
Yeah.
So, what's your favorite movie of all time?
Oh, gosh. I always hate the favorite of all time.
I know. It's a really tough. You can do a top 3 if you want to.
Yeah.
But, because there's a follow-up question to that.
Okay. Top 3. I'd have to go Top Gun in my top 3 for sure.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Matt loves flying, piloting, that sort of thing. So, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. My son's named after character.
Yep.
So, it's one of those.
That's right.
That one always has to be in my top 3 no matter what, I guess. Another really good one. This might be a hot take, but I really liked the movie Inception.
Oh, yeah, so good.
Yeah, I love the mental
super
twist
trippy
and just the weird stuff.
Is he in a dream at the end of the movie? Spoiler alert.
It's a good question, and
that spoiler alert was way late.
Yeah,
Sorry.
right. I think
The top's still spinning.
The top's still spinning, but he's not. Or let me remember it because it's been a while since I've seen it. He's not wearing his wedding ring, I don't think. And if I remember correct, it's one or the other. Where usually, if he's in a dream, that's when he is wearing his wedding ring.
Yeah.
When he's not in a dream, he's not wearing it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the case. But again, it's been forever since I've seen it, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But that
great
was,
movie.
Yeah, that was probably
Christopher
my
Nolan
top.
makes some good movies.
He does. And then, I know there's one I'm forgetting. Another one that's kind of trippy that I like, as far as messing with time and things like that, is Interstellar.
Oh yeah, great movie. That's another Christopher Nolan, isn't it?
I
think it
might be. It might be. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd say for now those are my top 3, but there are tons of other ones that I would throw out there as well.
Sure. Yeah, I guess if I had a top 3, one that I grew up, it was the first movie I saw in the theater by myself. P.S. That may sound weird, but I love going to movies by myself.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Like-
you catch flack for it,
Yeah.
but it really makes sense because if you're going to a movie, you're not interacting with the people you're going with.
Not necessarily trying to have a conversation with
No,
anybody.
you're just, you might have that kind of fellowship aspect of like going into it together,
That's
talking
right.
through it, building up the anticipation afterwards, debriefing the movie,
Yep.
having a good time there. But more times than not, I mean, it's not a big deal to go to a movie by yourself.
My mom watches and listens to our podcast every week, so I know she probably knows this. But the first movie I went to see by myself, and it was hilarious because we went to the North Park Mall, which is not far from here, and that back then the movie theater was the nicest movie theater in the area. And my dad and sister went to see Casper, which was an hour and a half. I went to see Braveheart, which was 3 hours long. And to make it even better, I get done with the movie, and there was a part in the movie where I was like, "Oh, the movie's about to end," and it was another hour and a half. And so I walk out, and the movie was amazing. Like I loved it. But I walk out, and my dad and sister are just sitting there, and I was like, "How long have I been waiting?" And they said, "Well, we started the movie, and then they had an issue with the film, and so we watched 15 minutes of it, and we've been sitting here since then." And I was like, oh, my bad. So, yeah, that would be one of my top 3. I've seen that movie a bunch of times. Hot take. You talked about Hot Take. The movie Tangled is a really good movie. It's a great Disney movie. I love it. I love the soundtrack. It's funny.
Can you demonstrate the soundtrack? I'm not sure that I'm that familiar with it.
You just got to go watch it yourself. I wish I could do that for you, but I don't want to ruin it. I mean, an already interesting podcast. I don't want to ruin it completely. So, and then a third one, and this goes to Christopher Nolan too. Man, he's coming in strong in the podcast. The movie The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
So that Batman trilogy those are the best comic book movies ever made, and that movie in particular is the best comic book movie I've ever seen.
Yeah. I agree.
Best Batman, best Joker. So the follow-up question to that question is, which of those movies could you watch 100 times and not get tired of it?
For my top 3 that I mentioned, I could probably do that for any of them.
Okay.
I like watching movies over and over and over.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
It drives
Some people
Whitney
don't,
crazy.
yeah.
No,
Julie's that
Whitney,
way too. She does not like watching the same movie over and over and over.
No, and I love watching. I've and of course of those 3, I've probably seen those multiple times. And even as I was sitting through thinking of other movies, I can watch through them and then hear, not too much longer go back and watch it again and pick up new things. So I could probably do that with any of the 3 that I mentioned.
Okay.
What about you?
Yeah, I'm pretty close to that. I don't think I could watch Braveheart 100 times. I've gotten to the point where I loved that movie growing up, and there's nostalgia and like sentimentality tied to that. I don't know that I love that movie as much as I used to. It's still good. I'm fascinated with the history of that part of the world, and I know that's where a good number of my ancestors are from, Scandinavia and that area, and so like Scotland, Ireland. So there's interest on that level, but I don't think I could watch it 100 times and still be like, I really enjoy this. But the other 2, yeah, I think so. The Dark Knight in particular, like just again, great soundtrack, great movie, great standalone in a trilogy. Like a lot of times it's hard when trilogies exist. You know, you like to see all three of them together, and that one just stands alone really well. Even though it doesn't fit into the other two movies as well. It's kind of weird in that way. But yeah. So, all right. So that 100 things. I was thinking about, so we talked about movies, talked about food. I know that you haven't enjoyed reading as much. Is there a book on your shelf that you could read 100 times?
No, not a chance. Not a chance. I pride
Is there one
myself
that you've
in-
read more than once?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah,
Is there one that you've read more than 10 times?
No.
Okay.
No. I know I've read Gaining by Losing by J.D. Greer. I've read it a few times, probably 2, maybe 3 times. Real Life Discipleship by Jim Putman. I've read that probably 3, 4 times. I know there's 1 or 2 more that I've read multiple times. But I don't know that I've ever read a book more than 3, maybe 4 times.
Yeah.
I mean, that's tough. And even those multiple times, it's not like I'm sitting absorbing every single word. It's much more of a skim.
Yeah, you're looking for something specific.
That's right.
Yeah. So mine, I have one that I've read double digits. I'm pretty sure. It's Till We Have Faces by C.S. Lewis. It's a novel they wrote.
You should have let me guess because I would have known for sure it was a C.S. Lewis book. But.
Yep. But yeah, I am not a huge rereader, but I do it occasionally. It depends on what I'm looking for and what I'm interested in. But like with fiction, if it's really, really good, I'll read it more than once. But typically, because of the time investment involved, I don't tend to reread a ton. I'm like you. I'll go back and look for stuff, but I won't necessarily reread. All right. So if somebody were to walk into your office and look at your bookshelves, what would they learn about you?
It'd be evident that all of my reading is very practical. I mean, I don't know that I have all my book. They would also learn about my organization. I have all my books organized, based on category and that sort of thing. And so you got, I've got my specific like theology type books, as far as research and understanding scripture goes. I've got my discipleship kind of section of books. I've got my kind of Christian living section of books. And I've got my nonfiction section of books, which is about 4, sorry, nonfiction. See, I don't even read enough to know what I'm talking about. Nonfiction is all
your
the
practical
other ones.
stuff. Yeah. So your
fiction section is like 4 books, and so they would learn that I clearly do not read just for pleasure, I guess. Even though the other stuff I've gotten to where I enjoy reading, but it's all, if I read something, I need to get something out of it. It's not just to sit down and enjoy a nice.
Yeah, you told me about the last time you went on vacation. You tried to take a book with you. How'd that go?
I tried not very well. I made it through the first page, I think, and I was like, "No, this isn't me. I can't do it." And I was super excited because I walk in the condo that we stayed at had a little bookshelf, tons of books on it. Reading through all these books, never heard of any of them. My wife, she's a reader, and so she was going through picking out like 3 or 4 that she was going to read while like she was down at the beach. I was like, I enjoy reading now. I'm like, I want to pick out one of these books and I'm going to sit down and read a fiction book and just enjoy reading. Yeah. And it was a great idea, but I sat down and
poorly executed,
started reading. I'm like, nope, not going to happen. And I laid it down on the little end table and it stayed on that end table until the day we were leaving. I put it back on the shelf. I was like, I tried, but, and I regret it, because like I said, now I do read more, but and I recognize the value of reading.
Yeah.
But growing up, I never had that, and so I'm very much behind when it comes to reading.
Yeah.
And I wish I would have embraced it more growing up. But,
sure.
But I didn't, and I was actually growing up in middle school. You had the accelerated reader stuff. I don't know if you still have that.
Oh, it's terrible. AR is the worst program on the planet.
Yeah, basically, you got to read a book, take
I'm
a
sorry
test
to
on
anybody who said they like AR.
I don't know that I've ever heard that. I mean, if someone has said that, there might be something wrong. But
I want to be careful. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings today.
But yeah, so basically, for those of you who don't know, you read a book, take a test on it, earn points based on how thick that book is, basically. And each year in our English class, you were given a set goal based on your reading ability, and everyone's goal was different. My goal was 7, which is like 2 Dr. Seuss books. I mean, it's not much, but I was not getting that. And so during our recess time, I had to go into a special reading club with our assistant principal, and we had to sit down and we had to read the book, The Best Christmas Pageant Ever, because it was worth 7 points. And everyone in this little reading club, 7 was the lowest you could qualify for. So we were in this little reading club, and we had to literally take turns. Like, we sat in a little circle and read this book page by page, and this person would read a page, then this person would read a page.
Oh my gosh,
and this
sounds so miserable.
Oh, it was awful. And they
used reading as a punishment. I'm so disappointed.
Yeah, and so now you wonder why I don't like reading. But yeah, so it just never stuck. But now, like I said, if it's going back to the movie question, I'm a sucker for true to life movies.
Yeah.
Even though the 3 favorites I mentioned, none of them are real, but it would have been too easy for me to like name the other ones, but like any movie that's based on a real event, a real person, anything like that, man, I'm going to movies to see it. It just always catches my attention, and that's because I enjoy history and and enjoy that sort of thing. And so similar thing with reading is I like reading stuff now to understand history better or understand different things that's happened, things like that. But
all right,
it is what it is.
I like that. I think if somebody walked in my office and looked at my shelves, they would think that there's something. I've lived 2 different lives, and what I mean by that is I have like a whole bunch of theology and commentaries and stuff like that, but I also have a ton of I've got a shelf of Shakespeare and poetry. And that's not like bragging. That's just like that's where my life was for forever. And I obviously have a fascination with English people that lived in the mid 1900s, because I got a whole shelf of Lewis and Tolkien and Chesterton and that group. And so I just got this really weird collection of books in my office that I'm happy with. I'm proud of. I'm like the person that says that, I've got my pile of books that I need to read, and I go to the bookstore and I'm like, oh, I'd like to read that too, and that, and that, and that, and that, and I end up with another pile of books that are waiting to be read, and very slowly but surely try to read my way through. Do you read more than one book at a time?
No, not at all.
Yeah, I have a tendency to read 4 to 5 at a time, which is a terrible habit, but like I enjoy doing that.
I've tried that because like I'll have a couple that I'm wanting to get into, but I just can't keep up, as far as, and then I get burnt out because again I have to force myself to read anyway.
Right.
And so if I'm reading 2, I'll get frustrated. I like completion, and so I'll read one book, finish it, and then start on the next one.
All right. Thinking about books, thinking about transitioning to the Bible. I didn't ask you this question ahead of time, so you don't know that it's coming.
Yeah, I have no idea.
And I'll give you some kind of in between time if you need it. So, which book of the Bible has had the biggest impact on you? That as you've read it and you kind of like thought about it and spent time with it, this is the one that like you just kind of keep going back. It's just natural for you to go back there. And why is it that that's the case? I can go ahead and share mine so that you can think about it for a second. So 2 Corinthians has been really, really instrumental in the last 10 years of my life. 2 Corinthians 4:7, probably what I would say is my life verse, that we have this treasure in jars of clay, that the surpassing power belongs to God, not to us. That in particular reminds me of who I am and who God is and what He has put in me. So like that's a really important passage for me. And then just kind of generally speaking, I see 2 Corinthians as Paul's theology of suffering. Like, how is it that we as believers in the New Testament suffer? Because Job, I like Job. A lot of people look at it as a way of understanding suffering. I really don't know if that's the point of the book. I think that's part of the book. But you leave a little dissatisfied because there is some confusion in my mind, about like, is the point that I suffer and it's really not for me to know why I suffer, and so I just kind of deal with it? or is there some kind of larger meaning to my suffering and that sort of thing?
Yeah.
Paul doesn't really take that approach with suffering. He's more along the lines of, listen, we suffer in this life because this world is broken, and we need to understand that. But we also suffer in a way that's purposeful because we come out of it on the other end and we're able to help those that are suffering. And that's kind of what he starts the book with, that letter with, and he builds out from there. So that's mine.
Yeah. I would probably go the predecessor of that one and go with 1 Corinthians.
So we just like the messed up church.
That's right. And that's a big part of why I like that, is because there's so much dysfunction, and of course, and we also know that while we call these 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians, really this was Paul's probably second and third letters to them, and so we see there was a lot of dysfunction, a lot of, things going on. And so that, for me, specifically in 1 Corinthians, whenever it kind of looks at, it helped me recognize this dysfunction does exist, but God is still working through it and helping figure things out. As I really zero in 1 Corinthians 9, is that passage kind of like where you're talking about, like kind of my verses, 1 Corinthians 9:19, where it says, though I'm free of all, I've made myself a slave to all so that I might win more. And it's that same passage where he talks about, to the Jews I became a Jew, to, and it starts going through all these things. And I think that's a very practical thing, and really what helped me in my ministry pursuit of begin to realize really what it means to be a follower of Christ. And, and understand that dysfunction exists, but we have this opportunity to, put ourselves in uncomfortable situations for the purpose of spiritual growth and discipleship. And so, whenever I was leading mission trips, whether it be local, national, international, kind of developing this, this is really what pushed me towards better understanding of cultural intelligence, to kind of like, well, what does this mean to become someone of this nation or in this community? If I'm coming in as an outsider to share the gospel, well, what is, how are they going to look at me being this outsider? How do I actually become like them, and try to figure that out? And so that, so I think the dysfunction in the church that happened there in 1 Corinthians helped make the scripture more real, I guess, because of course that's what the Bible's filled with, is dysfunction, but whenever
dysfunctional people.
But when you see dysfunction on this side of it, it's easy to say, well, Matthew and Paul and all these guys, they didn't deal with dysfunction in the early church, but that's all they dealt with. And the majority of the New Testament is writing to address those issues.
What's interesting about that, too, if you go back to the beginning of 1 Corinthians, we have a tendency to think to ourselves, to your point, that the early church, while there were issues, they, we think to ourselves, it's, in our world, you can't. The church is supposed to be a place of cleaned up people that have it together and like figured out, and that sort of thing. And you look at like 1 Corinthians, and if you read through 1 Corinthians, you're just like, man, they are totally screwed up people. Like they have so many issues.
Paul even says the people who are non-Christians aren't even doing what you guys have going on in your church.
So, but at the very beginning, in verse 2, it says, to the church of God that is in Corinth, to those sanctified in Christ Jesus, called to be saints. He calls them saints. And that's a good reminder to us that, like, while there is dysfunction in the church, we're still called the saints of God. And to not be okay with the fact that there's dysfunction in our churches. Like, we shouldn't just say, the church is just kind of a bunch of messed up people, so we'll just shrug our shoulder at our dysfunction and we're fine with that. No, the call is to rise above that dysfunction into holiness that God has called us into. So that's I like that.
I had a good friend of mine. He's not on staff at a church or anything, but I would consider him a pastor. But he said it this way, and it's always stuck with me. He talks about how, Scripture, there's very clear, and like talks about, this label of sinner, and kind of identifying someone as a sinner versus someone who's a saint, and that sort of thing. And the way he kind of coined that, and it's helpful, is when we make this profession of faith and we're following Christ, we're no longer labeled as sinners, we're labeled as saints, but we're saints who sin,
right?
And so it kind of points to that, yes, we have been redeemed, but we are still fallen people,
Mm-hmm.
and we are, we're no longer classified or labeled as sinner because Jesus has taken that. And so, that's always helpful for me to, not, again, like you said, not shrug shoulders like, oh, well, I'm just a saint who sins all the time, but it's, it helps. No, I'm a saint. I am a child of God, and so I should pursue him so that I, begin to continue to let go of this sin. And I'm no longer, again, classified as a sinner, but I am a saint. So that gives me something to work towards in this pursue, this holiness that God offers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good. All right, back to the 100 theme.
Yeah.
The Olympics are going on right now.
Yeah.
Would you rather swim 100 meters or run 100 meters?
Swim, without a doubt.
How come?
Well, tidbit, I was a swimmer, and so
I found that out the other day. I didn't know that.
Yeah, fast fact. And I swam. I actually, well, I will say, 100, swimming is somewhat tough because it's a little bit more distance, but it's short enough to where it's still a sprinting event.
Right.
So 100 meters is tough. But when I personally swam the 100 breaststroke. And the 500 freestyle.
Yikes.
And so those were my two kind of sweet spots that I fell into and really enjoyed. But I hate running, and so I could jump in a pool and swim laps, much quicker than I could motivate myself to go run anywhere.
See, I was the opposite. I ran track a little bit in high school and in middle school, and I liked it. I ran the mile. I never was a sprinter. I definitely was not a sprinter. I'm slow.
And I guess 100 meters still considered a sprint, isn't it?
Oh yeah, you're going
for
full
sure.
speed.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
that's not very.
Here's
far
the thing,
running.
though. It's the reason I would choose the 100-meter sprint is because it would be over quickly.
That makes sense.
And
that's where I started out swimming
really fast. So,
yes.
Because I've had one experience with a sprinting race. So I ran the 1600 basically is what it was, 1600 meters, which is a mile. And one practice, my coach said, I want you to run, we're trying to put together a 4x400 meter relay. Well, what I knew was 400 meters is one time around the track. I was like, all right, I got that, no problem. And I'd always run the mile, so I knew how to pace myself for the mile. And so I start running, and I'm taking that first curve, and he is yelling at me the entire time, faster, faster, you've got to go faster. And finally, I'm on a dead sprint.
Yeah.
I hit the back stretch, like that last little home stretch right before that last 100 meters.
Yeah.
I have no legs left. The wind is blowing full, like it's 15, 20 miles an hour in my face. At least it felt that way.
Yeah.
It may have just been I was so tired. There was no... Anyways, I get to the end. I cross the finish line. I've never thrown up at track practice. I got so close that day. I was like, it was miserable. I do not ever want to sprint anywhere for a very long distance.
Yeah.
But if I had to choose between those two, because I've tried to swim fast for, a lot, like not far from where we live, there's a healthplex that has I think it's an Olympic-sized swimming pool, and we were members there, and I did that some, and I remember getting to the end of the pool, and I was like, that's a long way.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be able to sprint that back.
Yeah.
So yeah, but
if it was Olympic size, it was 50 meters.
Yes.
So and when I first started swimming, that's what I did was because I didn't know how to swim. That's a whole nother story for another day. But joined the swim team, and I did the shortest events I could. But the problem was the shortest events are dead sprint events.
Absolutely.
And I was not a very good swimmer, and so I had no chance in those because I was not a sprinter, come to find out. And so that's why I started to just swim the longer events and realized that I had more endurance and I could stretch out and speed up as the race went. And when I did, when I was looking at going to the FBI, you have to do a physical fitness test.
Y'all just don't know about Matt.
I've got some stories.
There are so many.
But when I was doing that, part of the physical fitness test you have to do before going to Quantico was you do sit-ups, you do push-ups, you do a 300-meter sprint, and you do a 1.5-mile run. Those are the 4 events you have to do. And then you do pull-ups, but it didn't really count towards the points you had to earn in the other 4. Yeah. And that was the first time I had ever really ran sprinting, because I'd done some 5Ks at this point in time. I was doing some half marathons, and I did some distance stuff. Still didn't like running, but I did that 300-meter sprint. And again, kind of like the story you said, like I got to the end, didn't puke, but really felt like I could. And with the FBI, with that fitness test, you're going straight into the next event. So I'm pretty sure I started out, if I remember right, I think it was you started out with sit-ups, then you did push-ups, then you did the 300-meter sprint, and then you went to the 1.5 mile run. And so it was bad. It was not
brutal.
Enjoyable at all. But yeah, so I would definitely swim. And of course, I enjoy watching swimming in the Olympics. I've not got to watch a whole lot, but this go around. But
yeah. Okay. 100 push-ups or 100 sit-ups?
Current state.
Now, if you had to do one or the other right now, which one could you accomplish?
I would say probably push-ups. I mean, I would not be able to do them consecutively. Like I would have to
you gotta take breaks.
But I think I would have a better shot at getting 100 push-ups than I would 100 sit-ups. My upper body was always kind of stronger than my core. But
I feel a lot better 100 sit-ups 100 times. Like I've never had a really great strong upper body.
Okay.
I just when I was really young, I was always just kind of like light up there, but like strong legs, strong core. So I could probably handle 100 sit-ups and knock them out. I may be able to knock them out consecutively. I don't know. Maybe we should try that right now. No, we won't do that right now. Even as entertaining as that could be, probably not the best podcast radio. So, anyways, all right.
Yeah. We're talking about movies.
Yeah.
What about TV shows?
Oh, that's easy.
Yeah, I know. But 100 times, what would the show be? All right, let's do like you had the movies question. Yeah. First question is top three
TV shows.
TV shows.
Number one, without like a challenger, is The Office. Number 2 and 3 TV shows. I've never been a huge TV show person, but I loved the first 4 seasons of Lost. Like, that was really good TV.
Yeah.
And then they just ruined it. They just could not land that plane. They lied to us. I like, midway through the second or third season, I was like, oh, they're in, like, purgatory right now. Like, they're just kind of, they have to figure out a way to leave this existence. Mm-hmm. And then they get to the last episode. Spoiler alert. They get to the last episode, and they lie to you. Like, Jack shows up in a church, and all of a sudden everybody's there, and they're all dead.
Yep.
And they're like, "You're dead too."
Yeah.
And I was like, everybody knew that already. Why not just tell us earlier in the show that this is what they're doing? That would have made it way more interesting, because then you'd have been like cheering for them to get out of purgatory.
Yeah.
So The Office, Lost. Then probably, because I watch a lot of live sporting events when I watch TV, so I don't watch a ton of just like TV shows. Parks and Rec is okay. I did not like it nearly as much as The Office. I'm trying to think of like if I have like a drama that, Lost was kind of a drama, but it was weird.
Yeah. Definitely probably more classified as a sci-fi, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I guess, yeah, for sure.
Because
if I was gonna like pick maybe I could do a miniseries. I really did like the Loki miniseries.
Yeah, that was good.
There's only 6 episodes. Of course, they're having a second season, so that I don't know how they're gonna handle that. But if you know me very much, I'm kind of nerdy and I like weird stuff. So those would be. I don't know if Loki would be in my top 3, but it's one of the things I've seen recently that I really liked.
Yeah.
What about you? And I can tell you absolutely, I can watch The Office 100 times. Yeah. Like, it is kind of on replay at my house occasionally. So
yeah, I'm with you. Office would be in my top 3, just because it was so well done.
Okay, what did you think about though when you got to like, you got through season 7? Michael was gone, and then there was a weird season 8.
Yeah.
Which was really weird.
Yeah.
And then season 9, they were just trying to find a way to end it. I will say one of the things that makes that show really great is they ended it really well.
They did. Yeah.
Because like a lot of other shows, they struggle to end it, but like they ended it really well.
Yeah. The only thing I did not like about the ending, I was really hopeful they were going to do, is whenever they premiered and like they watched the documentary, like whenever it first aired on TV, I was really hoping it was going to be like them watching the first episode of The Office as we saw it, and like with the theme, and so that way it appeared as though we had been watching this documentary this entire time when their version of the first premiere of it was not that way. But that was only my flaw that I saw in it. But and I watched it. I watched it when it came out, and so it was one of those things where I made it. It's a little different when you watch a show when it comes out rather than like binging it, because you don't even think about having to make it through like first season. It's a little weak, at times, and if you're just getting into it, it's hard to just watch through the first season or that sort of thing. And so, but as you just going with it week to week, it's not too bad. And so you learn to walk through those seasons that are a little hit and miss. But yeah, I enjoy it, and especially seasons 2 through 5. I mean, there's not much better.
Oh man, it's great.
Not much better TV. So that would be kind of like I'm a sucker for real life movies. And TV shows, my preference when I'm watching a TV show is one that builds the story.
Right.
And so it's like a 10 season long movie basically, where every single episode is continuing to build the story.
Yep.
And so like really like that. So like Lost is a great example of that. I enjoyed that, and kind of that walking through. There was Prison Break.
You really like that one.
It was a good one, and similar, where it like first two seasons. I
can't believe you haven't mentioned like the one that you've told me about more than any other.
Well, and I'm gonna get to that one.
Okay.
And it's a parental advisory one.
Yeah, all these shows I would not encourage you to watch with your children.
That's true.
There's questionable stuff in there, and you got to be willing to like reject some of the ideas and stuff like that.
That's
obviously,
exactly right. And so with that clarification, the other one, well, it really had two. One is Walking Dead.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because you guys had like watch parties for that for a while.
We did, yeah. Like we would have our life group in East Tennessee, and then like after life group, we would all just hang out and watch Walking Dead together and have food. And I mean, it was a big party, and I loved Sunday nights, but it was great, So enjoyed that, and I read the comics before, and so that sort of thing. So I enjoyed that. But then the other one that I could sit down and watch just about any time because it's such a well written story is Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
And again, parental advisory, because there is, especially now that it's like when it came on TV, I don't remember it being as vulgar as it is on Netflix. I don't know if they filmed different takes, and so they showed different, they're showing
interesting.
But like language is a little bit more, strong on Netflix, I feel like. But, and then again, I could just be completely wrong, on that. But that's one, like, again, it was just such a well-written story, and it had a very clear beginning and very clear end.
Sure.
And that really helped it. And you get to follow these characters around and look into a very dark world that I personally don't have experience in, and you get to follow these characters and see how they change, see how greed affects, see how power affects people, and you have all these things. And like, again, I could rewatch it multiple times because every time, like, there's, I'm actually rewatching it again right now, and so I was watching one of the episodes in season 1 just the other day, and he's the main character is a science teacher, and he's teaching, his class, and as he's teaching, there's a very subtle line that very clearly points to his character and what's getting ready to happen in the next few episodes. And it's just amazing because it's such a well-written, like, this director and the creator of the show, Vince Gilligan, does a great job at, like, different characters will wear different colors that mean different things at certain times. Cool. I mean, a whole lot of thought went into that show, and so that's why it's, just amazing to me, and just a very entertaining story to sit down and watch and listen. And, again, it's dark at times, but it kind of gives you a glimpse into that world a little bit, and
how people get there.
Yes, because that's what it is. It's the entire show is just you're following different characters and seeing how they become different people, and and that's for all the characters, not just the main character, or two, but like all the characters have very good character arcs, and you see all of them transform into different people and how different situations affect them and stuff like that. And I felt like it was a pretty realistic journey as far as watching those characters go. So those are mine. But I'm a TV buff, so like anything that's good, especially if it's a story that builds. Like right now, I'm watching a show on Netflix called Outer Banks.
Yeah,
and it's like a treasure hunting kind of deal,
mm-hmm.
and it's not bad. I mean, it's pretty good. And so walking through it, and again, it's one where the story builds each week. So
Sure.
Those are my preference. I think The Office is about the only show that I can go back and watch multiple times that doesn't build on each week. Friends isn't bad either. I remember I grew up watching that, so that wasn't bad either. But
yeah. All right. This is my last 100 themed question. So you and I both enjoy sports.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a sporting event that happened in your lifetime that you could go back and watch 100 times and enjoy 100 times? I've got a couple for me.
Yeah. Go ahead and share yours.
Yeah, so there's two in particular that I can think of. So when Dak Prescott was at Mississippi State, we went down to Baton Rouge to play LSU. We hadn't beaten LSU in like 20-some-odd years. I think I had been at the last time that we had beaten them, and that was 1999, and that was at home, and it was a crazy game. So we go down to Baton Rouge. Dak is kind of unknown at that point still, and it's early in the season, and he comes out and has this amazing game against them. De'Runnya Wilson catches a couple of touchdown passes. We dominated the game, but there's this run that happened midway through the game where I think we're probably on about the 40-yard line opposite of our end zone, and Dak takes a step back and then takes off. It's a designed run, and he goes on this 60-yard touchdown run where he like plants an LSU DB into the ground with a stiff arm and like jumps over another guy and into the end zone. Like I could watch that on replay 100 times and still enjoy every second of that because Death Valley went totally quiet. Sorry, Greg. But not sorry, really.
Yeah.
You guys had plenty of wins against us in between then. So that moment, and then, of course, the College World Series that we just became national champs, and it's our first national championship. And I'm glad it happened in baseball and not any other sport. I mean, I'd be happy if it happened in another sport. But, like, baseball's been the one that's been so close for so long, and to have that happen in the way it happened, like to dominate the last two games against Vanderbilt, and to really it wasn't close at the end. And that was something I could go back and probably watch 100 times and enjoy.
Yeah. There's a few. Like I've seen a lot of really good hockey games, specifically in person. Some turned out the way I wanted. Others didn't. But being able to go to the Stanley Cup Finals a few years back, we lost that game. So I wouldn't want to watch that game 100 times. But just the atmosphere and stuff was neat. But there's also been a lot of hockey games I've been to where they went to overtime and things like that. And they've just been very, very good games. Tennessee basketball, I remember going and watching them play. I guess it was Memphis at the time. I'm trying to remember because I know we were playing against John Calipari.
Oh yeah,
and I just can't remember if it was
which version of blue
if he was
were they
at
wearing?
Memphis or if he had went to Kentucky at the time.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he was still at Memphis, and this is I'm about 99% sure that it was Memphis. And they were ranked 1. I think we were ranked 2, maybe 3 at the time. As when Bruce Pearl was there, and we had season tickets, and so we're there, and it was just and we ended up winning, to take the number 1 spot to lose the next week. But that game was a great game, very competitive, back and forth. And then another game that to kind of get out of my fan base a little bit that I went to a Chick-Fil-A Bowl game. I forget how many years back it was now, but had the opportunity to go to it, and it was Clemson and LSU played each other. And it was a great game. It was one of those where like LSU kind of dominated Clemson the whole game, and then Clemson ended up having a final drive to win the game.
Yeah.
That was when LSU had Don Chavis as their defensive coordinator, and he was notorious for going to a prevent defense and throwing the game away. We as Tennessee fans remember that very well throughout the late 90s, early 2000s. And so I remember watching that. And that was just a tremendous game, fun to watch. And this was really – Clemson was on the rise to become the powerhouse that they now are. LSU, was, a good football team, but it was kind of, again, before they got really back to a place of like prominence, where maybe considered now. But it was, it was good. And so that was one of those games. It was just a really good competitive football game. And
Sure.
I like sports, and so I'll watch games a lot of times and not really have a dog in the race for, but just if it's a good game, I could watch it multiple times, and I'll see reruns and stuff on TV and like to sit down and try to kind of analyze them a little bit and see what they did and calls they made and stuff like that. So I'm a sports fan, so it wouldn't take. There's probably a lot of games out there I could watch 100 times and learn something from.
I thought of one more question.
All right.
Could you foul off a 100-mile-an-hour fastball?
Not a chance.
If you got 100 swings.
If I got 100 swings.
Could you foul one off?
I'll say maybe. But like
I'm pretty sure I could not.
Yeah.
I've seen and swung at on a pitching machine an 85-mile-an-hour pitch.
Yeah. I would imagine I couldn't.
And that's coming in so fast. Like you blink and it's past you. I mean, it's
sure.
so fast.
Yeah, there's not a chance. I mean, I don't know the last time I swung a baseball bat. So I mean, I don't even know if I could do that. I may not be able to swing it. I played wiffle ball.
Yeah, wiffle ball's fun.
And I started. That was the first time I kind of returned to baseball a little bit, and I played some wiffle ball when I was a youth pastor, and I was like, okay, I can do this. But yeah, like hitting a pitch, there's not a chance. I mean, when I played Little League, that was the whole reason I quit playing baseball, was because I struck out every time. If I can't hit a 20-mile-an-hour baseball from a 12-year-old, then
there you go.
What? There's no chance I'm going to hit something coming off a fast pitching machine.
Yeah.
Or a real pitcher for that matter. My best chance of getting on base was getting hit by a pitch, and that didn't happen that often. My brother, if I remember right, that's how he always ended up getting on base, because he got hit like all the time. But not sure what that means as a baseball player. But
it's not typically something that you want to do.
Yeah.
But yeah,
and they would have me go up there and they'd have me try to bunt, and send me the signals and stuff. I didn't know what any of that meant. I mean, it was a joke, And I'm not a baseball guy, but it's fun.
There you go.
That's the one sport that I just, for whatever reason, never could figure out and get into.
I actually think hitting a baseball is the hardest thing to do in all sports.
Yes.
There's this guy I follow on Twitter. He's called the Pitching Ninja, and what he does is he breaks down like different pitches that guys throw, and he'll overlay them. So like he'll overlay a 100-mile-an-hour fastball and an 86-mile-an-hour curveball, and you watch the pitch, and it'll come out of a guy's hand, and it'll be in the same place for both pitches until about 10 feet from the plate. And all of a sudden, that breaking pitch will just drop down, and that 100-mile-an-hour fastball will just cut away from the. And I'm like, how anybody ever gets a hit, ever, against Major League pitching, I do not know.
Yeah.
Like, just can't even fathom it.
And I guess that's where like film and stuff comes into play a little bit more. Maybe is like their habits and know like when they're more likely to call a fastball or curveball or something. I don't know. I'm just.
I asked Jackson one time because he's seen some pretty high level pitching. I think he's seen a couple of guys that throw mid-80s.
Okay.
And like, I'm like, what? Like, how does this work? Like, how can you figure out whether or not you should swing at a pitch, that sort of thing? And basically, he was like, well, I can see the spin on the ball. And like,
which is impressive in and of itself, right?
Yeah, and so like he can pick up the spin and process that information so quickly, and that's what major league hitters do. I'm not saying that Jackson's a major league hitter. I'm just saying like that's how their brains work. Is that they can see a little thing and process that information so quickly that their hands and their eyes all work together to make. I don't even know how it works. Like I have a hard time walking down the hallway and drinking a cup of coffee because my hand-eye coordination is like it's trying to process all that information. So like imagine like a guy that's 60 feet from you letting go of a baseball 55 feet from you, and it's going 100 miles an hour. Imagine a car going 100 miles an hour. That's how fast the baseball's going.
Yeah.
And you got to figure out if you can hit that. And then
not a chance.
Actually hit it.
Yeah, not a chance.
And then actually hit it to where somebody's not in a baseball field. Again, it's a miracle that anybody ever gets a hit.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
All right.
So
I'm out of questions.
This has been our 100 podcast, and it's been fun. Just to kind of talk through, and the people listening or watching may be thinking the opposite. If anyone hung out with us
if
this
they made
long,
it this far,
then we got
kudos
some true fans of the podcast.
Absolutely.
But we will be back next week to continue our journey of debriefing the previous Sunday's sermon, and we'd love for you to join us as we continue to walk through the book of Micah. And but this was just a fun opportunity to talk through some things and just kind of maybe let our viewers or listeners see a different side of us a little bit. But this is a lot more like what everyday stuff looks like. We end up getting into some crazy conversations, but it's a lot of fun. But as always, like if you were coming in here today and listen to the podcast and really wanted to dive deeper into Micah, reach out to us. We're still open to have those conversations.
Send me an email.
Send Michael an email and say, hey, you mentioned this in the sermon. Could you tell me more about this or something? We always encourage you to do that because, we really mean it, and we like to have those conversations and continue that. But if you have any other questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Michael, any other staff members for that matter. But as always, we hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time.